Of course, it was a big party, and an annual one, too. Carol wouldn't know nor necessarily care whether I showed up at all. She had plenty enough to think about. But I would go nevertheless. I was curious about it. It was, I knew, an exclusive mid-city social event. Newcomers and outsiders should not question their good fortune. To spend time with Carol and her friends, her disciples, and maybe even the hotshot young mayor with his entourage. And if the mayor, why not that cute young weather girl from the Fox News at 6? Maybe a young single man could meet someone at a party like this. I was resolved to go and let the night unfold, instead of unravel as it might if I stayed home to read more Rabbit Angstrom or Binks bowling tales. Binks, the moviegoer, was getting married, and I was experiencing a little jealousy from it. The last small wisps of clouds disappeared to the east as I reached Orleans, and the sky became a regular late afternoon blue from end to end. The temperature dropped with a bit of high pressure moving in behind the clouds. And when I left for Carol's a little after 7, it was barely in the 70s. Fox News reported that it had reached a high of 92 degrees at the Weather Center that afternoon around 2. Lows overnight dipping into the 60s. It was spring in New Orleans, and the last time it would dip into the 60s until very late October, or early November. I wore a blue long-sleeve Oxford shirt and a pair of old British khaki chinos, brown leather shoes with, matching for a change, brown socks. Tired of walking, I drove to Carol's, but couldn't find a space until a block and a half away. No telling whether it was all for Carol's, or a combination of late leaving goers, residents, and Carol's guests all together. Parked on the side street back by Carol's driveway was Tony's big caddy, the behemoth, the turquoise showboat. Blocking the driveway was a blacked-out town car, either the mayor or the mob. No doubt all FOCs, friends of the hostess. I approached the party from North Rendon and could hear the gaiety before I could see it. I came round into Carol's yard and saw her deck full. People coming and going up and down the stairs and in and out of the house. Carol's pickup was parked in the driveway. The driver of the black town car had figured correctly that she wouldn't need to get out, or maybe didn't want her to. On the stair rails up to the deck were green and white streamers looped around the rails every 3 or 4 feet like ribbons around a maypole, or like the steps up to a campaign stage in a small town square. The rail around the deck itself was adorned with those anti-mosquito candles in aluminum pails. Citronella. The candles were just beginning to add light to the faces of the people standing near them. There were 3 candles visible on the back rail, and a few more on the side rail behind the 3 or 4 deep cocktailers. There was a keg packed in ice in a dark green Rubbermaid trash can, and around it were well-dressed folks in their 40s and 50s making jokes to each other about how funny it was they were all standing around a keg again. The crawfish was in a barrel by the round patio table in the corner, and the people seated were working on a big pile scooped out and dumped onto newspaper, spread generously like a tablecloth. Another small group, closer to the back door than the keggers, were discussing what Carol's big announcement might be. One suggested that Carol might be pregnant, and they all seemed to snicker at the thought. No, she's probably running for a Senate seat. She's going to announce her candidacy tonight, said one confident gentleman who was dressed more like an art dealer than anything else. Though, as we've seen, even lawyers dress like art dealers these days. I bet you're right, responded an attractive mid-40s newswoman that I recognized from one of the other local channels. Carol might have decided to run for office, but I doubt it's for state senate. She's probably running for a parish position. The voices faded and gave way to others as I moved to the door and went inside. It was full from front to back. Not full like a can of fish, but well populated. Crowded enough to give a newcomer the warm buzz of a room full of conversation, not just one or two. It was louder, but pleasantly loud. Backing it all up was music from the stereo that I would later learn to recognize as James Andrews and the Treme Brass Band, pronounced Treme or Treme, take your pick. Tony was in the kitchen by the fridge, and Phyllis was standing with Carol and a handful of admiring others deep in the living room. Carol was beaming and for a moment pointed toward a window as though explaining something about North Renton Street, or maybe just which way south was. One of the women with Carol said a visible wow-shaped sound with her mouth, though the only individual voices I could hear were from the people near the kitchen. Most of the guests seemed to have done what I did, or else never went to the festival at all that day. The few that showed signs of festival wear and tear were sitting out on the deck in shorts, t-shirts, sandals, and sundresses. The rest had either gone home and showered, or spent the day at the office or gallery or wherever. 45 or 50 people in a relatively small space, though ample enough to hold them. At the dining room table sat the young mayor of the city of New Orleans, an instantly recognizable face, sitting with a group of 6 and backed up by a formidably large character, there either for advice or protection, though neither of which the mayor seemed in need at the time. He was telling a lively story, and he had a captive audience. When I passed by the table, he glanced at me and gave me, for a split second I was sure, a look of recognition. As well he should have, and that it wasn't our first, second, or even third encounter. As fortune would have it, in a city of 1 million people, I, the newly arrived, quiet, non-connected, up-and-coming humanitarian, had come face to face with the mayor on now 4 separate occasions. What were the chances? A sign of his omnipresent accessibility, one might argue. The first was at the Canal Place Mall when I stepped out of an elevator and nearly knocked into him waiting to get on the elevator, accompanied by the same big fellow. The second time was similar, inasmuch as I was leaving PJ's on Carrollton, and there the 2 of them were again, marching up the ramp in warm-up suits. Both times the 2 of them breezed by like they had somewhere important to go, as mayors probably do. And while twice in a few months is a coincidence, 3 is just plain strange. Was Carol having me followed? Our third encounter was at the Championship West Golf Course in City Park. I was making the turn at 10 at the clubhouse, while the mayor was preparing to cut a big red ribbon inaugurating the quite bizarre new cement gazebo in between the 9th green and the road that splits the golf courses, not unlike the Parthenon structure farther south in the park by the tennis courts. There was a photographer and a few Bayou Oaks golf dignitaries present to share in the ceremony. As we were passing, the mayor pointed to us, and then the photographer asked us to walk by twice so the mayor could be pictured with real live golfers in the background, adding appropriate set decoration to his Parks and Recreation photo op. We obliged happily, and the guy I was playing with said it would probably get us in the paper, which it did. 2 indistinguishable male golfers over the mayor's shoulder, one carrying his clubs, me, and the other pulling a dolly. The mayor paused in his story and nodded faintly to me with squinted eyes, clearly remembering my face but unable to place me, which was for the best, I figured. His bodyguard, on the other hand, recognized me instantly and made eye contact and scowled, though I later noticed he seemed to scowl all the time, at everyone and everything. Just my luck it would be to be profiled as a mayor stalker by the mayor's own personal security force. A couple of accidental meetings, and pretty soon I'm a wanted poster and a body floating down the big river. The crowd in the corner ignored me as I passed, but the group around the mayor's table in the dining area all looked up in my direction when the mayor paused his story. Wanting to avoid the 4th encounter, I didn't stop. The group resumed their mayor-focused chit-chat, and I entered the larger, less hindered space of the living room area. I moved through several clumps of standing chatters and sidestepped a youngish group by Carol's desk, finally to arrive standing a half step behind Phyllis, facing Carol and the guest she was with. Carol immediately interrupted one of the men. "Michael, great to see you." There are a bunch of people here you should meet, Carol said graciously and enthusiastically. I looked around the circle to meet the faces, prepared to shake hands with them. Carol made the introductions, starting with the newest arrival. Everyone, this is Michael. Ashran, I offered. Carol had inflected as if to attach my last name. Ashran. He rents half the Orleans place from me. He's also a great painter, Carol added. Oh, what do you paint? Asked one of the women to Carol's left, obviously quite interested in the subject. Taking the opportunity to be a bit dry-witted and vague, I followed Carol's lead and told the woman I painted mostly hard-to-reach places, and the woman was duly fascinated. Oh, like what? She asked with narrowed, critical but approving eyes. Oh, you name it. Overgrown alleyways, scenic front porch scenes. I do it all. I was suddenly carried away with the joke and would wait for Carol to change the course of it. Watercolors or oils? Asked the woman's husband. Recently just oils. Oil-based, to be precise, I told the man. I broke my deadpan and raised my eyebrows to Carol to put a stop to it. Carol's eyes were creased and twinkling, maybe a drink or two ahead of me, and she delayed a second before explaining. Her confused friends were just beginning to imagine I might be the next Degas when Carol laughed and recovered us. Michael helped me paint the outside of his house last week. I'm hoping he'll sign on as my full-time handyman. And then, quieter, almost under her breath, God knows I'll need one. She smiled and ignored her mumbled comment as one of her guests began talking again, a middle-aged man who seemed, at a glance, rather gay, with thinning hair combed very neatly and a dapper black four-button suit buttoned high across a soft, indistinct torso. Well, I'd love to see your work sometime, Mr. Ashran, said the man, pronouncing Ashran, no doubt deliberately with an inventive Argentine flair, like Perón, with the emphasis on the Rhone instead of the O sound. Viva Acheron! Either still mistaken, or playing it too catty. The puffy man looked firmly at me, then at Carol, probing for answers to all his most urgent questions. Carol ignored. Michael, I'd like you to meet my good friends, Alex and John Melchior. Beth Gerhardt and Violet Beard. You know Phyllis, of course. And this is Mr. Taylor from next door. Everyone put their hands out and said hello, except for Mr. Taylor from next door, who had just been accidentally insulted by the hostess and wasn't happy about it. Put in his place by a mere geographical connection to Carol and her party. Mr. Taylor from next door. Made privy by proximity, and not, poor guy, by invitation as the rest of us had been. Suddenly feeling sorry for him, I held out my hand and he took it quickly. He shook my hand firmly, then stealthily departed, gliding toward the outside wall and the group of people over by Carol's desk. Alexis and John own the big house down on the corner with Bella, and Beth and Violet live on City Park Avenue up by Delgado. We said our hellos and oh reallys, and then Carol split us up. She took my elbow and led me out of the circle to a place on the floor with a better vantage point for inspecting the whole room. Front to back we moved gradually, and over the course of 40 minutes or less, I met everyone at the party, even the mayor, who Carol had known for years, and vice versa, dating back to when he was just a local favorite son and a notorious downtown playboy. The introduction went smoothly, I figured, on account of Carol's participation.